Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Monday morning. We have another great show for you today. Lots of news to discuss with tariffs. I think we're going to be spending a lot of time on that and some other subjects. Nice to see you, Niall.
Good to see you too, Robbie. A plethora of topics on this rather wet and windy Washington morning.
Yes, gloomy, positively gloomy.
But you're going to bring some light to the situation, Robbie, no doubt. What is on your radar?
I shall try. Well, over the past several weeks, President Donald Trump has laid siege to Columbia University, canceling $400 million in federal grants to the elite school. Now, in exchange for the restoration of funds, Columbia's administration has agreed to capitulate to a list of demands relating to the anti-Israel demonstrations that occurred on campus. The university will ban protesters from concealing their identities with face masks, create new disciplinary bureaucracies to punish purportedly disruptive students, and even police the Middle Eastern Studies Department for alleged anti-Semitism. Now, in my view, it's not inherently wrong for the federal government to examine its priorities and decide that an extremely wealthy private institution of higher education with an endowment of $14.8 billion is perhaps an unsympathetic recipient of public funds. However, let's be real. The Trump administration is not focusing on Columbia because it wants to refund the taxpayers. It's clearly punishing the university for failing to prevent the protests. And that is a problem. I'm not afraid to admit it. I like a lot of the things Trump does. Other things I don't like so much. This is one of those things. And look, while some of the protesters at Columbia illegally occupied buildings, prevented other students from attending classes, otherwise impeded legitimate school functions in violation of campus policy, the heavy-handed measures imposed on the university will almost certainly lead to a crackdown on free speech. Some anti-Israel protesters are already facing severe sanctions and even deportation. There is no question that the threat of loss of funding will compel Columbia's administrators to police anti-Israel expression in a manner that is careless and inconsistent with the campus's stated commitment to abiding by the First Amendment. To the extent that the Trump administration's actions have motivated this change in policy, they are drawing criticism from defenders of free speech. Jonathan Zimmerman, a historian of education at the University of Pennsylvania, told The Guardian that Trump's attack on Columbia is already having a chilling effect, and he's never seen anything like it before. Quote, historically, there is no precedent for this. The government is using the money as a cudgel to micromanage a university. Zimmerman's concerns about free speech are well-founded, as I've said, but he is flatly incorrect to state that this has never happened before. On the contrary, Trump is notably following the exact precedent set by his two predecessors, Presidents Joe Biden and Barack Obama, whose education departments engaged in precisely the same government-directed suppressions of civil liberties on college campuses. Democratic administrations did not merely use, quote, money as a cudgel to micromanage a university. They used money as a cudgel to micromanage every university in the country. Let me explain. Now, this was done beginning in 2011 under the auspices of Title IX. That's the federal statute that prohibits sex and gender-based discrimination in education. Under Obama, the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights, OCR, reinterpreted Title IX to require all universities that receive public funding to police sexual misconduct on campuses in a manner that violated both due process and free speech principles. These requirements were panned by organizations that work to defend such principles, including the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE. FIRE's president, Greg Lukianoff, accused the federal government of forcing universities to investigate harassment claims even when a reasonable person would not have found the speech objectionable, thereby weaponizing the sensitivities of the least speech-tolerant students of campus. Indeed, the policies forced on campuses by the Education Department were shockingly illiberal. Administrators were told to take swift action against any unwanted conduct of a sexual nature, which in practice meant students and professors faced disciplinary measures for speaking out on such subjects. Now, one of the most iconic, well-publicized instance of this Title IX-driven censorship was the persecution of Northwestern University professor Laura Kipnis, who wrote an essay in 2015 in defense of a colleague who had been accused of violating Title IX. Kipnis decried the atmosphere of paranoia that had taken hold at Northwestern. In response, she was herself accused of violating Title IX and subjected to a Kafkaesque disciplinary proceeding. She wasn't even informed of the charges against her until she agreed to sit down with the investigators who were flown in from out of state. She wasn't allowed to have an attorney present. That's a mockery of justice, and it's what the government effectively told Northwestern to do. Here's Kipnis describing her ordeal a few years ago.
This emanates from the Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights, and all campuses that get any kind of federal funding have to stay in compliance with Title IX regulations, which are very vague, or they risk losing federal funding. So of course, Northwestern is in the position, if anybody files a complaint, to jump into gear and pursue this investigation. So that's kind of what happened. And yes, I was allowed to have a faculty support person, not a lawyer.
And that was the first time to even hear what the case was against you at that moment, and that's the moment that you also had to respond to it?
The procedures are, also baffling, and I don't know if they're like written down somewhere. I found them out as I went along. Like I said, can I have a lawyer? No, you can't have a lawyer. They wanted me to show up to a meeting and they would tell me the charges. They wouldn't put the charges in writing. So they wanted me to show up so they would tell me the charges in person and then have me respond to questions.
No lawyers, no written charges. If Trump forced these policies on universities, I think I know what the media would be talking about. To restate, these farcical persecutions, as described by Kipnis, were done at the behest of the Obama administration in accordance with a strained legal view that federal non-discrimination law already obligated universities to police sex-related speech. When Trump came to power in 2016, his education department rescinded this guidance to the universities. Then 4 years later, the Biden administration largely restored it. The potential loss of federal funding is exactly what motivated virtually every college and university in the country that ran afoul of OCR to fall in line and police students and professors in a manner that violated their free speech and due process rights. Importantly, there were virtually no university presidents who stood up to the Obama and Biden administrations in the face of these threats. No elite campus behaved bravely. Not a single member of the Ivy League decided at the administrative level to fight back. In a recent Facebook post reflecting on what happened, Laura Kipnis wrote this: "People may have forgotten that the Obama and Biden administrations also weaponized federal research funding by threatening to withhold funds from institutions they deemed to be out of compliance with their mandates. Universities were bending over for federal funds long before Trump, spending untold billions to stay on the right side of the OCR bureaucracy." Now, the Trump administration is using anti-Semitic discrimination as a pretext to police speech on campuses, whereas the previous Democratic administrations used gender-based discrimination as their pretext. It's the same bad playbook, and it's engendering the same bad reaction from the universities, which is total surrender.
Well, Robby, as you might expect, I disagree with some of that. I think there are two separate issues. One is the Title IX provisions that were made during the Obama administration and later reinforced by Biden about the treatment of sexual harassment or sexual violence or allegations thereof. And then there's a separate issue about whether that was, in your words, the exact same precedent here. And we can certainly talk about the first one, and I think it's an interesting topic, but I don't think it's the same thing as is happening here for two reasons. One is, in relation to those Title IX provisions, the money was never directly taken away at any point that Title IX has existed from the universities. Trump, in this instance, rocks up with this demand about $400 million from Columbia, pressures them in that way almost instantly. The second thing that I think is very important to differentiate the two is that the Trump administration explicitly is going after actual teaching within the universities. It was calling for certain departments to be placed into receivership. Columbia basically conceded the point, just avoiding the word receivership, but is having these reviews of its Middle Eastern departments and other departments. To me, that is an administration getting its fingers into information, scholarship, teaching in a way that was not the case in relation to the Title IX issues you're talking about.
I don't agree. I think the Title IX issues did involve exactly what was being taught in classrooms, maybe in a more indirect way than this is the case, because the Trump administration has prompted Columbia to respond, where they're reevaluating the department. But I spoke with, I'm so passionate about this because this was a major area of reporting and research for me back before I was a TV commentator. And I spoke to professors. Again, when I say no one stood up or said anything, I mean at the administrative level. Professors were outraged. I interviewed very left, far left, zany left in my view, professors at Harvard who are like, this is insane. We're afraid to teach anything. I talked to law professors who said, we are afraid to teach the law as it relates to sexual assault adjudication in class, because we're afraid that if someone is triggered, traumatized by this topic, we will be the subject of a Title IX complaint. We are going to step back from even teaching would-be attorneys how to handle this topic. That'd be like medical school, not teaching how to perform surgery because somebody's afraid of the sight of blood. It really was going to be a backward step for progress. Again, this is not crazy conservative saying this. This was law professors. The Title IX guidance went so far. And you're right that they didn't actually take any of the funding, but that was the very explicit threat to do so, and why every single university. I thought to write this because I saw what Laura Kipnis had said recently, and I've seen people wonder, why is no one standing up to the Trump administration? No one stood up to any administration that has ever threatened to do just this.
I think that there were obvious excesses in that policy, and in fact, I was reading one of your articles early this morning, Robby, and you linked to a genuinely interesting and kind of shocking case in Colorado State University in Pueblo.
Oh, I remember this one.
And this is, I'm just summarizing your own
For
work.
our viewers, yes.
But this is an instance where a student athlete and a female trainer had a consensual relationship which she, the trainer, always said was consensual and no harm came to her. And a third party reported it as an instance of sexual harassment or inappropriate behavior.
Yes.
And it went forward, and the student or the athlete was suspended for some years.
Yes.
Eventually, now, I'm not going to defend that. That seems a ludicrous situation. I do think that the broader point here is that one of those issues in Title IX was the evidentiary requirements, right, where it became a preponderance of evidence was all that was required, rather than clear and convincing evidence. That's obviously an issue.
Absolutely. All right, well, we've got lots more to get to today on Rising. We are going to talk about Trump's tariffs, which getting him into hot water, perhaps that he will be able to get out of or won't be able to get out of. We're going to discuss at great length coming up next. Stay with us.